Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Elementary Study Public Forum. We really appreciate everyone coming tonight. I am Tim Luff. I'm the Superintendent of Schools. I am going to start by asking the school committee to kick this off as a school committee meeting, so I'll let them open up.
Would one of my colleagues like to make a motion to enter into this meeting?
So moved.
Moved by Teresa, seconded by Kate. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Thank you. So you'll have to forgive me. This is not the morning time, as it says on the screen. I tried to go through and modify things to evening, and this definitely says overview of the morning. So this evening, we're going to be talking to you about kind of the purpose, the process, and the decision timeline that we're using for what we're calling the Elementary Study Project. Kind of a general overview of some of the scenarios that are under consideration. Some general answers to some frequently asked questions that have come up through the process so far. Listening session, which is really the bulk of this day, this evening, which is for you to provide your feedback to the school committee, to us, and then a closing with some next stages and future opportunities for feedback. I would like to introduce the elementary study team that is here tonight, so I'll let you three introduce yourselves if you could.
Hi everyone, I am Michael Bullier, principal of the Willits Early Childhood Center and a member of the Elementary Working Group.
Brian Riley, school principal at the Prescott.
Diane Ferrer, principal at the Balch Elementary School.
And our partners from Sanborn unexpectedly could not attend tonight, so we will do our best to give you all the information that we can as we move forward. So let's kick it off, shall we? So the expectations for this forum, again, it's a time for you to provide your feedback regarding the study and the project, and for the school committee to hear and for the administration to hear what your thoughts are on the scenarios that we're proposing, as well as the timeline that we're putting out there. The school committee will listen, they'll record your feedback, answer questions as appropriate, so they will provide answers for you tonight to the extent that they can. And at the end of this, actually now and at the end of this evening, there will be an opportunity to participate in a survey to provide even more feedback. If you haven't done that yet, there's this thing we call the thought exchange, that you can answer multiple questions to provide all the feedback you can, and actually go back and forth and rate each other's ideas about the most important things that you think that we should consider in the elementary study project. Very much on the outset, I want to say that no decision will be made until we get your feedback. There are no decisions made yet. There's a lot of conversation about what the models could look like, but the feedback from the families and the parents are some of the most important things that we have. And so there's a survey that closes on the 21st, so we want to make sure you get your feedback in by then, and the school committee will be voting on a model on October 30th. That model will be voted on, and should that be voted on, within the next 2 weeks at the next school committee meeting, I'll be making a recommendation on timeline for that implementation, depending on whatever model it is. I will not say it will be next year immediately. I will not say it'll be the year after. I don't know yet. There's a lot that goes in, obviously, to the detail. There's a lot of feedback coming from parents about the timeline, so we want to make sure that everything is there. But that is roughly the timeline. But I wanted you to know that none of that will be decided until we hear from you. So the purpose behind the entire study, we're opening a brand new Coakley Middle School next year, right? It's going to be a 5 through 8 beautiful school, and our 5th graders are moving up. So that opens up some space at our elementary schools, and we have a duty to kind of look at what we would do with our elementary schools, the space that might be open from that, and go from there and kind of look at the overcrowding that we currently have at the schools and try to figure out the best ways to deal with that. Each of the elementary schools right now are currently close to, at, or above capacity for student enrollment. So we also asked the question, what can we do, not just looking at capacity, but what can we do to kind of have a more equitable distribution of students among the schools, both in terms of class sizes, but also potential special programming needs and opportunities. And that really led the committee and the elementary team to kind of use this redistricting reorganization tool, which kind of includes possibly redrawing the neighborhood school boundaries and the lines, while keeping all 6 schools, that includes the Willett, open, and just changing the grade level configuration. The process also allowed us to account for planned housing developments as we looked at new district lines, and by drawing lines that enable a K through 4 model at the Willett, additional benefits were revealed. So we'll kind of go a little more into the process now. So the Elementary Study Committee worked with Sanborn, created and reviewed multiple options. This included K through 4 models, it included early and upper elementary models, and continuing the current kindergarten model. The early and upper elementary models were really tricky because you had kids going all across district lines to get to different schools. So ultimately, they did not find that one viable. I just want to lay that out there. There are benefits to a model like that, just not that the elementary study team felt were viable in the path that we're going to follow. They followed these guiding pillars as they went through their decision-making process. They considered scenarios to optimize physical space. They considered models to enhance educational programming, to balance capacity to account for future growth, to attempt to balance the demographics that I had shared about earlier, to maintain and potentially lower transportation costs, and to maintain neighborhood schools as closely as possible, which is something we've heard in the survey results quite a bit. So 3 viable scenarios came forth from the Elementary Study Committee to the school committee based on that study, and now is the community feedback time that we're taking in considering those 3 distinct models. So again, there will be no decision on any elementary redistricting or reconfiguration until all of your feedback is received. Again, survey closes October 21, final decision October 30th on the model itself and kind of the lines that are desired. And then, that's either, do we want K through 4 schools? Do we want to keep a kindergarten school? What sectors of town would go to which school? And again, I will say there will be no redistricting or reconfiguration any earlier than next school year, the 25-26 school year. Not a decision, but it's not something that's happening this year. And I've been saying this since the summer because I didn't want parents to think that we were going to start this school year and all of a sudden have these changes. But just clearly, it's not going to be any earlier than next year, if it's even then. So shortly after that decision, I'll evaluate the feasibility and timing for those changes. So things like parental concerns, transportation needs, facilities and operational needs, special education programming, staffing needs are all in play. We're already discussing and having conversations about 5th grade teachers now, and will they move to Coakley? Will there be different changes there? If there were different changes and we were, for example, opening Willett as a K through 4 school, how would we then staff the Willett school where there are all kindergarten teachers there now, and would we have to shift qualified teachers, and would those be teachers who were non-professional teaching status, for example? And ultimately, it's a conversation about what's in the best interest of the district, but that takes time. So all of those things will be considered in my consideration when I bring a recommendation to the committee after their vote on the educational model that works best for kids in the district. All right, so I want you to quickly take a look at these color codes on the screen. Now, if you have a black and white version over there, I truly apologize, but you can see it on the screen here. You can see Balch is there in yellow, Callahan blue, Cleveland is kind of a purple, Oldham's green, Prescott's pink, and Willett is, I'm not really sure, red-orange. Salmon, we'll go with salmon, I like. So I want you to remember these because as we go through the maps, there might be labels on the maps that say, BAL, for example, but it might be in blue. So that means that BAL, where it's blue, is actually Callahan. So it's the color codes in the maps that you really want to focus on based on this model. So just to quickly take a look at the current layout, you'll see here, obviously the color codes are right. Cleveland's in purple, and I think Prescott here is more in a pink. Callahan's blue, Oldham is green, Balch is yellow. That's the current district layout with all of the students that are in kindergarten going to Willett. You'll also see the capacity concerns that we have here. Balch is at 100% capacity. Callahan right now is at 103. Cleveland's 88. Oldham's 87. Prescott's 92. And Willett right now is 89. So we do have a pretty significant concern with overcrowding at this very moment. And with that, just to get another quick look at the color codes, I'm just going to show you them one more time. I want now to pass it over to Michael Bollier, who is going to talk about scenario 0, which is the kind of move the 5th graders up and do nothing else scenario. So, Michael.
Yeah, so as Superintendent Luff mentioned, scenario 0, in scenario 0, the Willett remains a district-wide kindergarten. Fifth grade will move up to the middle school, and we'll have our 5 remaining elementary schools that all have grades 1 through 4. So if you look at the map for scenario 0, it looks the same as our current layout because it's retaining the same layout. The only difference is that these elementary schools no longer have 5th grade. Next slide. So in this do-nothing scenario, the 5th graders move up to the Coakley, the Willett remains kindergarten only, and our elementary schools have grades 1 through 4. So what that doesn't do is it doesn't resolve the capacity issue that we currently have at our elementary schools. We saw that all of our elementary schools are either at capacity or over capacity. I'm sorry, it actually does resolve that capacity issue. It doesn't resolve that at the Willett, but it does resolve the capacity issue for the elementary schools, is what I meant to say. Because we're moving grade 5 out, so we're allowing more room for our elementary schools, and we did see that our capacities are over or at the elementary schools. It actually brings us significantly under capacity at the other elementary schools, except for the Willett. That'll be around 89%, which is currently where it's at. Another thing that the scenario 0 doesn't do is it doesn't address the additional transportation costs that come with operating a separate kindergarten building. What it does do is it keeps the current district maps the same, and it also allows opportunity for future growth at our elementary schools. And I'm going to pass the microphone to Principal Ferrara.
Okay, scenario 1 that we looked at is with the Willett becoming one of the K-4 schools. Capacity is balanced with room for growth. And this is where Windsor Garden students would go to the Cleveland school, so would go here. If you look at the map, you can sort of see the color changing, so that the Balch is still in yellow, Cleveland's still in purple, but now you see Cleveland 2, some numbers there in that salmon color, and those would be students who would therefore go to the Willett new K-4 school. And so there's some shifting of neighborhoods. Capacities drop. When you look at the numbers, you'll see that would put Balch at 83%, Callahan at 80, Cleveland at 80, Oldham at 71, Prescott at 83, and the Willett at 72. These are rough estimates with current numbers now, but you can see how the capacity drops throughout the district. Yep, scenario 1. So students residing in Windsor Garden would all be districted to the Cleveland school. It's good for the community to go to one school within the same boundaries of Cleveland. It helps with transportation. Many Cleveland students would be moving to Willett, and students in the Windsor Garden area would be moving from Prescott to Cleveland, resulting in a major shift to the Prescott school population as well as the Cleveland. But this scenario does provide the most balanced distribution of multilingual, special ed, and low-income students across the district schools. So that's what scenario 1 is about.
And I'll take scenario 3. Scenario 3, very similar, use the base model that is in scenario 1 with the Windsor Gardens community moving out of Prescott. The neighborhood of Prescott School adjusts to that based upon the pink, and the difference there becomes the Windsor Gardens community goes to the Willett School rather than the Cleveland School, and adjustments to those boundaries since. So as Superintendent Luff started with, an example of some color changes but labels not changes are ones in the middle of the screen here. You see CALL-5, BALC-4, those are the original labels. Those students currently go to Balch and Callahan, but the color has changed. It's pink, which means that they would then go to the Prescott School. Those are 2 neighborhoods that would be redistricted in addition to some others. So again, this sticks with the K-4 model. The difference here is some adjustments in the Cleveland and Willett neighborhoods to account for the Windsor Gardens community. As you see, is a little pink down there between the purple and the yellow. And those 2, the Windsor Gardens is broken up into 2 small components.
Okay. All right, so we're going to pop in some frequently asked questions that we have been hearing. The first question that we've heard a lot of is, why is eliminating central kindergarten and lengthening the kindergarten instructional day so important? And Dr. Bollier?
So one clarification is we're not lengthening the kindergarten to school day, but we're thinking differently about how students spend time at school. So one example is that students would be spending an additional 45 minutes of their day in classrooms where they can learn, as opposed to spending that 45 minutes in the morning and afternoon on transportation from the neighborhood school to the Willett. And that duration for kindergartners in terms of how much learning time they're getting is considered best practice and aligns more with the instructional minutes guidance from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education.
Thank you. Next question is, how does redistricting/reconfiguration affect community and neighborhood schools?
So in both scenarios 1 and 3 that we just showed, there would be neighborhood schools. So the community and neighborhood school experience would still exist. That was something that, as we were talking about setting values for this entire process, we looked at a lot of different configurations that our partners at Sanborn gave, where you had examples that really didn't make sense. All three of us are members of this community, or were members of this community, grew up here, currently live here. Some of the scenarios you looked at made sense numbers-wise, but really didn't make sense for Norwood. So a couple of examples we gave at the last forum. One scenario that we looked at, the back path here that you have at the Cleveland that goes up to Geraldine. One of the scenarios was to redistrict that neighborhood along Geraldine to go to a different school. Doesn't really make sense. Someone walks out their door, looks at the Cleveland school, needs to get on a bus to go somewhere else. The same thing was right along Washington Street, which is down in South Norwood, across the street from the Balch. Putting kids on the bus from the Balch neighborhood to go across town to the Old Dam or the Prescott or the Cleveland. That just didn't make logical sense to us. And so we really value that there's a lot of families who can walk to their school or get on a short bus ride, not all the way across town. That when we looked at what sort of the values were, the neighborhood school model really kind of made sense, I think, for Norwood, and tried to do our best with Sanborn to maintain that.
What are the benefits of having K-4 schools?
One of the biggest benefits of having a K-4 schools is reducing the transitions for kids. You know, if you have a student who started with us in the LMPA or some other preschool, when they go to kindergarten and they're transitioning out of their familiar preschool into 1 year of kindergarten, and then getting familiar and used to the Willett School, and then transitioning to the elementary school. And now, you know, with the 5th grade being out of the building, that's even a shorter transition time. They're not in their elementary as long, then they'll be going to 5th grade. So one of the benefits is the reduction in transitions that kids would have to make. We also really like the idea of kindergarten students learning from older students. You know, think of your 4th graders being book buddies or technology buddies with kindergartners, so learning from older students and seeing those role models. It also provides opportunities for students and parents to make connections with neighborhood school peers, beginning right away in kindergarten. You know, some of the kiddos in kindergartens make really good friends, and sometimes those kids are not necessarily nearby, but this gets them in their neighborhood and making friends quickly. Allows kindergarten educators to maintain student relationships beyond kindergarten and serve as in-building supports for grades 1 through 4. So again, you know, I was principal at the Willett before Michael, and it is hard. You get really used to a whole group of kids for a year, you invest and they go. And then the teachers, you know, and you don't really see them. Like if you're in an elementary school, especially if you're a 1st grade teacher, it's just cool to see the kids grow and change and come back and visit. So that's a nice opportunity. Enables K educators to join in cross-level grade collaboration. And I think we're finding more and more that students and families are really complex, and having kindergarten right in the building and having those transition meetings and talking and seeing and having 1st grade teachers come down right in the building as opposed to trying to connect with the Willett at some point before kids go up is a huge benefit, I think, to the students and the families.
Thank you, Diane. The next question that's come up is, how are equity and diversity addressed in the redistricting/reconfiguration plan?
I'll answer that question, but I just also wanted to add to that, you know, this time of year too, it's a reminder to all of us that, you know, having those consistent supports for students entering first grade from the relationship that they developed in kindergarten is huge. So whether it's, your teacher that you had in kindergarten, or the school adjustment counselor who worked with you and your family, or the school nurse, all of those individuals get to know our students, like Principal Ferrara said, and then they have to start all over again when they get to first grade, building those relationships and creating that trust between students, families, and staff. And I also just want to point out, too, that this really impacts the most vulnerable students. So thinking about students on IEPs who might start at Little Mustangs Preschool Academy for pre-K, by the time they get to first grade, they've already gone to 3 schools, which are 3 significant transitions and 3 whole different teams of educators supporting them. So that really does address equity and diversity, right? Because when we're thinking about redistricting and reconfiguration, we want to keep our most vulnerable students at the center, and one of those subgroups is our students on individualized education plans, who would have more consistency and be able to build those relationships, across their K through 4 formative years. Also thinking about scenario 1 in particular, that scenario provides a more balanced distribution of our multilingual special education and low-income students across the district, so we don't have as much of a high concentration in certain schools, high concentration of needs, and also high concentration of resources and privilege.
I'll take the next question, which are, what are the concerns regarding the staffing of schools post-redistricting reconfiguration? So we are really diving deep into the number of staff members we will need to have in each of these scenarios. And then we're also cross-referencing that with the opening of Coakley, and the staff members will need to ensure that we open a brand-new middle school in the appropriate way. Right now, the way it looks, if we were just to do the elementary redistricting piece, without talking about the shifting of the 5th grade teachers up, scenario 1 and 3 would likely add anywhere from 2 to 3 teachers for the elementary level. So that's scenario 1 and 3. So scenario 1 is the model, it's a K through 4 model, 6 schools. Scenario 3 is the K through 4 model, 6 schools. So that would be 2 to 3 or even 4 in some cases we would have to add to the current budgeted number of students this year. Scenario 0, here we say may result in no changes, but it actually could result in a slight reduction of staff based on this, on the shifts, keeping class sizes anywhere from between 18 and 19 to 22 to 23 on average. A few upper level classes could be upwards of 23 or so. But that would be currently what we're looking at for actual grade level teachers that are needed. That is subject to change. I've told the school committee multiple times it's definitely going to change. We have brand new numbers coming from Sanborn based on this year's current enrollment, and then we're projecting out for the next 3 years to make sure that we have that down accurately. The number of specialists will likely remain the same in these particular models. We have the same number of students being served. We're talking about ways to shift schedules, to make things work, to make sure that the specialists can actually meet all the needs of all the students there, so that shouldn't change too much. It's the contractual obligations that I had shared earlier that are really going to be impactful and have to be considered thoughtfully as we move through the process, because we need to make sure that we have the right people in the right places, and every school is staffed with the most expert staff that we have, and so that will be there. We'll be reevaluating these numbers constantly. I'm still doing it now. We had a school committee meeting, I think it was last Wednesday maybe, and we discussed this thoroughly. So if you want to tune into that, take a look. There's a lot of detail in there as well, and I will continue to reevaluate this prior to the October 30th vote for the school committee. How will existing students be prioritized in the redistricting reconfiguration plan? Mr. Riley, you want to take that one?
This is, right, so this question would solve all the problems, right? Everybody gets to stay where they are, and you just let people move sort of gradually. In my school community at the Prescott School, 52% of our student population would be impacted on 2 of these scenarios, right? So this is a big concern, I think, of our school community, and it's a really complex problem. And grandfathering essentially is when you allow people to stay and you slowly, gradually move people over. We ultimately decided, in looking especially with Sanborn and some of the communities that they have worked with, where they look to see if grandfathering would be possible, it really seemed like it would create more challenges and ripple effects than it would be worth it. Class sizes, cost, you would have a potential for huge populations in a specific grade level at a specific school that might not have room, right? So if 52% of my population at Prescott decides, hey, we want to be grandfathered in, and then you have move-in population in new districts say, hey, we also want to go, I could be upwards of 150% capacity, right? And so it would really be difficult to try and do that in a sense where you're able to make that happen. It would have stresses on transportation, overcrowding in schools, and ultimately through redistricting, it does have the initial adjustments and the displacement of students, which when we went through this process, as we shared at our last parent forum, every data point that we're moving is a family, and every family has one kid, multiple kids, many kids that have different impacts. And as educators, that was something that wasn't lost on us, that every time there was a slight adjustment on a map or a move, it's not just a number that goes into a different box, it's, oh, that's another family that's impacted or a different family. But based upon the redistricting, it does have initial adjustments. Its intended use is for the longer term benefits of sort of doing a course correction in that. So grandfathering was something that we've got a lot of feedback on. We've looked at sort of what the policy is on school assignments, and that just is something that would really be a game changer and would sort of tip the scales to make this not work. We do recognize that it's, like I said, that it's tough, especially for existing students, especially for if you have a third grader or someone who's like, all right, we're moving up, we're in our last little bit here, and then all of a sudden there's going to be a change. That is super hard, and that is not lost on the working group, who is very technical and so what we're looking at, and ultimately it's not our decision, but we tried to make something work that said this sort of does some course corrections for our district and sets the ball in motion for longer term success here in Norwood.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. The next question is, what are the considerations for future growth and population changes? Mr. Riley.
So we, in the beginning of the process, we sort of projected out what our current numbers were, and I think what we hear a lot when anything comes up in town is future growth, right? So Prescott School, you come out of my building, straight ahead of our entrance, they are building a brand new lot, right? They've split Richland and Cranmore roads, and they're putting in 10 or 11 townhomes in there. So what we did is we got some information from the town planner and said, what developments are out there? What does the composition of those look like? Are we talking about 3 bedrooms, 1 bedroom studios? Probably 6 years ago or so at some point when Avalon came online, there was a conversation of, wow, there's going to be an influx of kids. That didn't really come to fruition. The school system itself was able to manage where those sort of kids went. But we feel pretty good about what we know about the developments in Norwood now and what the composition of those developments are. And the boundaries in Sanborn have sort of accounted for those. And so, like I said, we have those developments everywhere. Prospect Street, if you're in Oldham School, family stuff going in over there. Everywhere in town there's building up, but we think that those numbers have sort of been built into the current projections.
You and I will take the last two here. Are school start times going to change if Willett becomes a K-4 school? I will just share that if any school start time changes, it would be by minutes and no more than that, and it would be in the benefit of the students either at the elementary or the middle school by no more than 10 minutes. Obviously, that would be a conversation with the school committee to make sure that we can do that. It really depends on the transportation routes, right? If we now have 6 buses or 6 schools with busing in the same start times, it makes things a little bit easier to figure things out that way. So we will be looking at that, but again, it will not be a major impact to any of the elementary schools or the middle school. And again, all 6 elementary schools will follow the same schedule in a K-4 model, which is beneficial here. The financial implications of redistricting reconfiguration, we've kind of gone through this. It's mostly around staffing. We continue to work on each of the models, and again, we'll get the vote on that. I, again, shared with the school committee some of the financial implications to the staffing plans. There were some questions about possible playground needs. That is not an issue that is going to be on the table at all. Projected class sizes we have to continue to look at, specialist schedules we have to continue to look at, and the use of kindergarten aides possibly that are currently at the Willett, and how that would kind of flow through the rest of the schools if kindergartens were in each of those schools. Transportation expenses, we did finalize this actually. We would need 2 additional buses for scenario 1 or scenario 3. However, We also need 2 additional buses no matter what for the opening of Coakley. So those 2 additional buses would already be budgeted and in place should we decide to do any of the K through 4 models in scenario 1 or scenario 3. So those are the major financial implications. I mean, there are always things that come up. We'll find that as we go, depending on the time that we move and the cost to our facility department, right? If we shift early, those are all things that we have to play around with and figure out. But the staffing one is the major impact. Okay, so you're not here to hear from us. You are here to voice your feedback on the proposed scenario that we have. So again, the school committee is going to listen, record your feedback, answer questions as appropriate. There's going to be an opportunity for you to participate in the survey, so please don't leave until you do that, or just take it home. The link is on the handouts if you like. It's also on our website. And as a reminder, no decision will be made until we get your feedback. I really am really serious about that. So I want you to know it's really important for me to hear so I can make the recommendation to the school committee as well appropriately. So just next steps in planning. October 9th, which is tomorrow, we have a staff forum at the Willett Kindergarten School. It's 2:45 p.m., so that's just for staff to come in and voice their concerns and their questions about the model. October 21st, the survey closes. We're going to analyze that feedback the next week in detail, and we'll share that with both the community and the school committee. The school committee will vote on the model potentially on October 30th. From the 31st to the 8th, after that vote is made, I will really delve in and develop a timeline, kind of an implementation recommendations, and share that with the community and the school committee as well. And November 14th, I will present that to the school committee, and they will vote on a timeline implementation plan. Okay, so here's the thought exchange. I want you to scan this QR code if you want to. It'll bring you right to a survey that you can do. And again, that will close in the... Oh. Well, look at that. Thank you. So there's that. Thank you, Brian. All right, so we have some pre-registered speakers. What I will do is I will take one in person first, and then we'll go to the Google. Is that okay? And then we'll go back. We have about 8 folks, 1, 2, 3, actually 4 folks online and 2 folks in person. So why don't we start with Chris Paddock, if you want to come up to the mic and share away.
I got my notes. I'm genuinely curious about, like, what is the realistic timeline on the implementation of this? I know it says no sooner than next school year, but is that really what's going to happen? Like, it just seems like it. Like, I was looking on the Sanborn website earlier today, and like a lot of those studies were from like 2019, 2020, and like Wellesley's just adapted theirs like 6 weeks ago when it was written in like 2019. It seems like people generally take a long time to implement these to like help kids get ready for it. So I'm just curious if anybody has any more insight as to like realistically what's the timeline for implementation on this.
Well, what I will share.
Am I just riffing? Am I just talking?
No,
Okay.
it's okay. It's okay. I mean, I'll share what I can. I mean, honestly, I don't know yet. So if I'm told that it's going to be a kindergarten model, right, continued model with 1 to 4 in the other schools, the timeline's less intense, obviously. There's still some changes there, right? I'm still working on getting kids out into Coakley and all that. If I'm told it's a K through 4 model, then I'm really delving in and saying, so what are those contractual obligations? How long is that process going to take? And I don't know the answer to that yet. That process will happen after the school committee makes a vote on really what the best instructional model is.
I just think about like all the kids, if it gets implemented for next school year, right, there is a significant amount of kids who are going to learn like in December that it's their last year at the school they're at, right? And that just doesn't feel very good, you know, like given, it would be nicer, I think, to give them like, okay, so next September they walk in knowing like, okay, this is my last year at this school, right? The rug doesn't get pulled out from underneath them halfway through the school year, right? That just seems like just in terms of a matter of the heart, it seems like a nice thing to do for the kids.
Please.
In response to that, I think that when this first started getting discussed, there was kind of 2 minds about it. And I'll just say, to echo Tim, Superintendent Luff, that nobody has a decision yet. I don't think anyone feels like they know the answer to this, but I think because of all of the change that is going to happen with the middle school, I think there was a thought process that one big, doing more disruption at once instead of like disruption, then more disruption, could be, like, there's an argument there. But there's an argument to the other side, to your point, and for a lot of other reasons, and the costs and logistics, and largely community buy-in. So, we're very aware that if people, maybe it's too much, there's logistically, ripping the Band-Aid is one thing, but human nature, it's a whole other thing, right? So I think people were hearing that, and that's kind of where those things were coming out in the thought process. But it's not decided.
And then my other thing too, like I really hear the complications about grandfathering, but I really think we need to make like every effort possible to make sure that a kid doesn't have to switch schools in 4th grade and then in 5th grade, right? And then I know it's like a super huge logistical puzzle, but you talked earlier about like the multiple transitions, right? Those kids have already made a ton of transitions, and there is a big amount of kids who will then have to make 2 more very rapidly. And I just think like I think in terms of the larger buy-in from the community, if they can see like, okay, they made this one pretty huge, complicated accommodation, I think the buy-in you get from that moving forward could be huge. But I'd really like to see just every effort made to prevent that scenario from happening, because it's another one. It's just like, that would just feel really bad, I think. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next, we'll go online to Sarah Riviere. Mr. Kidd, could you put her on for me? Okay. Ms. Riviere, can you unmute yourself if you'd like to speak?
Hi, I don't think we had a question.
Oh,
Appreciate it, though.
okay, thank you very much. I will then move to Jennifer Bender, if she wants to speak.
No question here, thank you.
Great. Leah Gay?
No question.
Okay. One more.
I don't have a question either, thank you.
Thank you, Megan, I appreciate it. Okay, so that brings us back in-house to Marcy Taggart. Would you like to speak?
Hello, everybody. Hi. Thank you for letting me speak, and oh God, can we not put me on? Actually, thank you, Chris, because everything he said is exactly what I'm going to say. So I understand all the scenarios. I mean, I grew up in Norwood. It was K through 6 when I grew up here, so I understand like having the kindergarten in there, not having to transition them is definitely beneficial. I'm speaking as a 3rd grade parent whose daughter would be affected by the move. And that means by the time she goes into 5th grade in the middle school, that will be 5 schools that she's transitioned into. And I know for her, it would be a difficult thing, especially to learn in the middle of 3rd grade, oh, by the way, this was your last Monster Mash, and this was your last ice cream social, and all those things that they love to do at their elementary schools. I know it would be really difficult for her, and I'm sure it would for a lot of the 3rd graders that would have to move. So. Definitely timing is my #1 concern, and I do feel like, I mean, inevitably at some point it's going to be a 3rd grade that's going to know that they're not going to be at their elementary school for the next year, but I feel like even if like we waited a year just to ease that transition, because learning halfway through, it doesn't leave a lot of time to put thought into how we can soften that transition, like visits to their new school or meeting with the new teachers, anything like that. I feel like and I know the timeline isn't decided on, I get that, but if it were to be next September, I think it would be very difficult. And that's it.
Thank you very much. That is all the pre-registered speakers that we have. I don't know if, does anyone else like to speak that is here? Well, okay, come on. Could you just state your name for the record so we have it in here?
Sure. The microphone's intimidating. My name's Sarah Lane. Both of my kids, a second and a fourth grader, go to the Balch School. My concern, I mean, I really appreciate this forum, has been great. I feel like just sitting here, I got a lot more information. A lot of my concerns have already been spoken by Chris and by Marcy. The survey itself, though, gosh, I'm like nervous speaking into the microphone. Do you hear my voice? It's embarrassing. I feel like I am an educator, so I'm familiar with just a lot of the terminology that's being thrown around and things that are being talked about. I know that you could translate the survey into multiple languages, but as a native English speaker and someone already familiar with the terminology, I feel like it was exclusive. It took me a long time to fill out that survey, and I'm wondering if we can simplify it in some way, like a Google form. Do you support this? See, the microphone. What's your preference for timeline? I can appreciate that we're getting a lot of feedback that way, but I'm worried that it's a lot of feedback from a minority of the populations that this is going to affect.
The specific questions themselves, how we're laying that out in the survey, just to be
I
clear.
think the questions themselves, and honestly, I think just like being asked to really like fill in boxes like that, right, and short answers and write in paragraphs, I just think automatically there are certain people who simply don't have the time to do that, right, or don't have the capacity, or I found it exclusive is the word that comes to mind.
I appreciate that feedback, and you're doing great in the microphone, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I hope no one else is watching. Can we not put this on?
Do you want to come up and speak?
Hi, my name is Amy D. My children are at the Cleveland School. My son Jackson is in the second grade. So I do echo the grandfathering in. I know it would be difficult. I think that we've kind of seen in that age group, the first grade, the second grade, a lot of difficulty in that age because of COVID. They all were kind of robbed of their preschool experiences. I know my son would have been, he got some services with early intervention. His birthday's in December. He aged out, didn't have enough to get into the preschool at that time. So we said in September, we'll put you in. In September, that was 2020, so he didn't get to go. And then when he did, we were in masks, and to get that, just their socialization wasn't, and I know you know that. So this is just another transition, and when you speak of transitions, I agree, that it is. I see the benefit of the K-4 model, and I understand long term, but long term for them is my concern, is my son's long-term. I appreciate the community's long-term as well, but some kids make friends easily and some kids don't. I also did see a benefit for having the kindergarten separate as well, just in terms of keeping a diversity. If you're in your same neighborhood, you're meeting for all that time, you're with the same kids that are in the same kind of economic bracket that your family's in as well. And when we go to the Willett, we meet kids from all different neighborhoods. And then they get separated, but they see each other at sports, but they're exposed to a lot of different neighborhoods, a lot of different families that have a different status than they may. So I think that's just, I agree, if, every effort to grandfather, to help those kids, even if they had 2 years, in one school before they have to go to middle school, which is a really tough social time, for kids. And some kids will be fine, and some kids are going to have a hard time. My other point of waiting a little bit longer too is I'm on the PTO here. That the Willett PTO, it's a 1-year PTO. It doesn't have the same budget as the elementary schools. The PTOs at the elementary schools help facilitate a lot of different programming for those schools. The field trips that the kids take, all of the enrichment programming, teacher appreciation, which it matters, for the culture of the school, the attitude of the school. So that first year, that Willett PTO is going to be at a disadvantage because now they're going to have to, rather than just that one field trip, they're going to have all of those grades as well. So I think people need time to, and PTO is a volunteer position, people have other jobs, people need time to gear up for that as well when you're talking about timeline. So those are just my considerations. So
thank you very much. Was there anyone else that wanted to come up? Okay. Well, I for one personally very much appreciate the feedback that was provided here tonight. Thank you very, very much for coming, first of all, and obviously speaking of feedback. Did you guys want to say anything?
Last forum, Mr. Riley was talking about sort of opening. I wonder if you could speak again to that, whatever the timeline, there will be efforts made to sort of reopening and remember that comment? I thought that might be helpful for the people.
Yep,
Everything you do.
I've watched the tape back multiple times. I'm like, Bill Belichick, I'm like, could have done that better. So we were talking a little bit about sort of what a transition would look like, right? And especially in my school community, I started with saying 52% of my population is going to be moved, so that's going to be a huge, brand new student population if this happens. The way that our mindset would be is that we're reestablishing a school community, right? So you're starting with a core group of kids who have been there, but then you're bringing in a whole bunch of kids, and that takes rebuilding of a community rather than just refreshing what you have. So when we have the start of a school year, there's a lot of reminders, there's a lot of familiar faces, you sprinkle in some new ones. When you're looking at a big turnover, and again, other schools are not as impacted as our school community, but you're going to be bringing in a lot of new kids and a lot of new families, and it's our responsibility to make sure that all of those kids, whether they're new to Prescott or returning to Prescott, and their families feel as if they are part of the community and are part of the community. And so we would do things like you're opening a new school building, right? So you're bringing kids in, families in to tour the building, and instead of assuming that everybody knows, oh, this is how our drop and go line works, like you're showing people and you're giving people the opportunity to engage in that. And I think that that's a big commitment. I think it's also exciting to be able to say, hey, we're reintroducing people to a community, a school community that we really have a lot of pride in. And so that's something that is already on our radar. We're sort of going through maybe a dry run at this point with 4th and 5th grade, right? So I know we've all had conversations with our PTOs about what does 4th grade look like, a promotional ceremony, a end of year party, what are the sort of things? And so we're already talking about how those sort of shifts are happening and what that's going to look like. And so I want to be really mindful of the fact that, it's not a raging river and it's like, hey, new families, just jump in and catch up. It really is a stopping of the bus and getting everybody on it and then moving our collective school community forward, which is going to take time and it's going to feel really different to our staff and to our kids and to our families. But in the long run, it's going to be something that makes sure that we're all one community rather than the sort of long-term community and then the new people.
You did great, Mr. Riley. That was good. I watched the last one, too. That was way better. Anything else from the school committee before we close it out? Okay. Well, thank you all very, very much. I'll ask you guys to close up your meeting and shut it down.
This is an official school committee meeting. I will need to entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved. Moved by Teresa, seconded by Kate. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much, everyone. Really appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you.
Very much.